peaceful and at ease. May I be home. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. May we be
Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. That lovely introductory music was sent to us from the Victoria Unitarian Church, where our previous members, Penny and Farrell Boyce, are now members there. My name is Elizabeth Beckett, and I am your service leader this morning. A service leader is more like the face of a whole team of people who make our gathering worship possible. Mary Ellen Scanlon, the chair of the worship committee, provides service leaders with templates and help in those panic moments, and there have been a few. Beverly Horton helped with the music, while John Elliott gets us all up there on Zoom. Doreen Knoll and Jennifer Kay make the order of service available to you, and Bruce McPherson is keeping us all connected this morning. This is just one of the ways that we as a church community nurture one another. Today, our speaker is Anne Bachma, a member of our congregation. Anne Bachma is an award-winning journalist and author of the memoir, My Year of Living Spiritually, one woman's secular quest for a more soulful life. This book was published last fall by Douglas and McIntyre. Anne is also the founder of the 6-Minute Memoir live storytelling event and the 6-Minute Memoir online writing workshop series. She was recently honored by the City of Hamilton's Arts Award in the category of writing. The title of her sermon is My Year of Living Spiritually, 1 year later. As we gather this morning, let us reflect that the history of our country includes the regretful and tragic treatment of the Aboriginal people who were here when the first settlers arrived. We benefited from our history. They did not. Let us commit to reconciling the harms in which our national history participated. Our doors, physical and electronic, are open to the slightest touch. We are a community that strives to live our first principle of recognizing the worth and dignity of all of us. No matter who you love or where you are on your own journey through life, both physical and spiritual, you are welcome here today. My daughter, Juliana Beckett, who is the lead of the Canvas team this year, is joining me to help with the opening words, which are from our gray hymnal, as we always call it, the gray hymnal or the teal hymnal. This is the gray hymnal, and it's reading number 657. This reading was authored by Sophia Foz, who is a renowned educator in the Unitarian tradition. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged.
Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies.
Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities.
Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness.
Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved and friends from enemies.
Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern.
Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction.
Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration.
Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness.
Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth.
Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world.
Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life.
Each time we gather, we light a chalice. It reminds us that we are entering sacred space and sacred time together. May this flame be our light of fellowship and love. Okay, now also connection. We are going to now be hearing the hymn Woyaya, which is from our teal hymnal, number 1020.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. 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 Oh yeah, yeah.
Our story for all ages this morning is Ish by Peter R. Reynolds and published by Candlewick Press. Ramon loved to draw. Anytime, anything, anywhere. One day, Ramon was drawing a vase of flowers, and his brother Leon leaned over his shoulders. Leon burst out laughing. "What's that?" he asked. Ramon could not even answer. He just crumpled up the drawing and threw it across the room. Leon's laughter haunted Ramon. He kept trying to make his drawings look right, but they never did. After many months and many crumpled sheets of paper, Ramon put his pencil down. "I'm done." Marisol, his sister, was watching him. "What do you want?" he snapped. "I was watching you draw." Ramon sneered. "I'm not drawing. Go away." Marisol ran away, but not before picking up a crumpled sheet of paper. "Hey, come back here with that." Ramon raced after Marisol up the hall and into her room. He was about to yell, but fell silent when he saw his sister's walls. He stared at the crumpled gallery. "This is one of my favorites," Marisol said, pointing. "That was supposed to be a vase of flowers," Ramon said, "but it doesn't look like one." "Well, it does look vase-ish," she exclaimed. "Vase-ish?" Ramon looked closer. Then he studied all the drawings on Marisol's walls and began to see them in a whole new way. "They do look ish," he said. Ramon felt light and energized. Thinking ishly allowed his ideas to flow freely. He began to draw what he felt, loose lines quickly springing out without worry. Ramon once again drew and drew the world around him. Making an ish drawing felt wonderful. He filled his journals, tree-ish, house-ish, boatish, afternoonish, fishish, and sunnish. Ramon realized he could draw ish feelings too. Peace-ish, silly-ish, excited-ish. And his ish art inspired ish writing. He wasn't sure if he was writing poems, but he knew they were poem-ish. Ponder, pond, ponder, dream yonder, pond, pond, yawn, yawned, great wander. One spring morning, Ramon had a wonderful feeling. It was a feeling that even ish words and ish drawings could not capture. He decided not to capture it. Instead, he simply savored it. And Ramon lived ishfully ever after. And that's our story for today.
Thank you, Tim. As many of you know, and all of you should know, we are in the midst of our Canvas. Canvas period is over at the end of this week, October 25th. And I was reminded of something which I'm going to share with you today as our Canvas moment. A few years ago, I was in Jackson Square, and I was accosted by a man who wanted money. He asked me if I would sit and talk to him. Having recently heard from our minister, Reverend Victoria, the value of actually talking to people who want money, I agreed. We sat together on one of the benches that used to be in the mall. He asked me my name and told me his, and then I gave the man a toonie. He didn't thank me, but instead he asked if I could give him a bit more. He said he needed $7 to register for a space to sleep that night. I didn't actually believe that he had to pay for a shelter bed, but given that I personally had evicted hundreds of people from their housing as an adjudicator with the Landlord and Tenant Board, I had much karma to remedy. I gave him $5 more. Then he said to me, "Do you believe in God?" I replied, no, I don't." The man was visibly shocked. "You really don't believe in God?" he exclaimed. I affirmed that indeed I really did not believe in the existence of God. "But Elizabeth," he said, "you should believe in God. If you pray to God, he will give you whatever you want." So I said, "Well, you believe in God. Why didn't you pray for what you wanted?" He laughed and he said, "I didn't need God. I had you." This completely affirmed my humanist faith. That is, it's up to us to work the miracles. So we were both happy. During Canvas, I think of this story. We at the Hamilton Unitarian Universalist Church cannot count on manna from heaven. We cannot offer sacrifice to endear us to powerful gods. We cannot rely on a larger church organization to pay us a smaller church. Having said that, the UUA has been incredibly generous to us over the years. I invite you now to take a breath and let your mind relax. And as you are relaxing, we will be hearing a chant from Cindy Carey. After the chant, there will be a time of silence to allow us just to be in the moment.
Good morning. Today's chant is Jagadambe Ma, O Mother Universe, Jai Mata Kali, victory to Kali, destroyer of ignorance. Durga Jai Mata, victory to Durga, destroyer of suffering. Sing along or close your eyes and just think of those wonderful words.
So, Anne, please tell us what it's like 1 year after the publication of your fascinating book, My Year of Living Spiritually.
A year ago this weekend, I stood at the front of this church, live and in person, as I launched my new book into the world. Afterwards, I even hugged people. Imagine that. We're living in a different world now, but while we can't connect physically, we can still connect through our stories. Even though I make my living as a writer, putting together a memoir was a daunting task. It helped that I had friends and family who were supportive. I also had a good editor who I knew would not let me embarrass myself too much. But the person who helped me the most was someone I didn't even know. Anne Lamont, a writing guru of sorts, who has penned several memoirs and collections of essays, including the best book on writing I've ever read, Bird by Bird, Instructions on Writing and Life. It's full of reassuring advice, like how perfectionism can paralyze you and prevent you from ever writing a word if you let it, and how you just have to get the words down without being too harsh on yourself. Write shitty first drafts, she urges. You can always revise later. Lamont is sympathetic to the inadequate feelings that can arise when we try to write our story. She says, every writer I know sits down and goes, oh, I'm doomed. The well has run dry. I'm beating a dead horse. It's awful. My tooth hurts. I think I need a root canal. And plus, I have cancer in my legs. If she could feel that kind of insecurity, then maybe there was some hope for me. There are a lot of similarities between writing a book and living a life. For example, writing like life can be hard. That's why writers come up with all kinds of tricks to motivate themselves to get the words down. There's a funny story about Victor Hugo, whose unique approach to writing resulted in masterworks such as The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He would instruct his valet to confiscate all his clothes and take them out of the house. Confined naked in his home with nowhere to go, he had nothing to do but write. For me, the trick was to sequester myself as well. Mind you, I was fully clothed most of the time. This extrovert had to become a hermit. I essentially locked myself away for many months and disconnected from the world in order to concentrate on what felt like at times an overwhelming task. Most things become easier the longer you do them, not writing, at least not for me. It was easy maybe 5% of the time. Otherwise, it was mostly a struggle, an absorbing and sometimes happy one, but a struggle nonetheless. A lot of people, mostly those who have never done it, think writing isn't all that hard. There's the old joke about the brain surgeon and the writer who meet at a party. The brain surgeon says to the writer, "How interesting. I've always wanted to be a writer. And in fact, when I retire, I'm going to become a writer." The writer replies, "Well, isn't that a coincidence? When I retire, I'm going to become a brain surgeon." I think Hemingway said it best. There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Another thing that helped me handle the daunting prospect of writing a book was understanding that you get through it as much as you get through life, one day at a time, one sentence at a time, sometimes one word at a time. The novelist E.L. Doctorow had this to say about writing: "You can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. You don't have to see where you're going. You don't have to see your destination. You just have to see 2 or 3 feet ahead of you." So you just take it bit by bit. Or, as the title of Lamont's instruction manual indicates, Bird by Bird. That title was inspired by a childhood incident involving her older brother. When he was in 4th grade, he had a term paper on birds due the next day. He hadn't started it and he was panicking. His father sat down with him and said, "Just take it bird by bird, buddy. Just read about pelicans and then write about pelicans in your own voice, and then find out about chickadees and tell us about them in your own voice, and then geese." As she says, this is also a good approach for life. We may be panicking, we may be going through a hard time and projecting our fears into the future. Usually this doesn't help us much. Best to take it day by day, bird by bird. I can tell you that the process of writing a book is an exercise in self-doubt. You will ask yourself, does my story matter? Why should anyone care about it? What should I put in and what should I leave out? Who am I to think I can do this? Isn't it hubris to write about my ordinary little life when so many others have much more dramatic stories to tell? Sylvia Plath said, "The worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt." But you have to find a way to put your head down and lay the self-doubt aside. One strategy is to think of self-doubt as a pesky person you don't much care for. Put them in another room when you're writing and just ignore them. Trust me, they will be there when you lift your head. I also tried to heed the wise words of Globe and Mail columnist Elizabeth Renzetti, whose collection of essays titled Shrewd begins with this brilliant first line about the self-criticism that we can inflict on ourselves. "The voice in your head is an asshole," she says. My book focuses on a year I spent engaged in 24 spiritual practices, everything from meditation to experimenting with solitude, paring down my possessions, going on a pilgrimage to swim in Henry David Thoreau's Walden Pond, going to witch camp, the Women's March, taking magic mushrooms for the first time, and getting a tattoo, among other spiritual adventures. The very act of writing itself can be a spiritual practice that can offer both healing and transformation. That's because writing teaches us to really pay attention to our life, to reflect on it, to try to make some sense of what happened, and to look for the meaning in it. Zadie Smith says, "The very reason I write is so that I might not sleepwalk through my entire life." Often the personal stories we carry in our heads and hearts are rooted in some kind of pain. Writing about them can dissolve the hard knots of loss, betrayal, regret, and guilt that can keep us stuck in the past. Every life is full of different experiences, difficult experiences, yours and mine. It's entirely unfair that some people have much greater challenges than others. Most things you will get over in time, or you'll learn to live with them, or they'll become life lessons, or maybe even a story. Writing about the painful stuff can be a way to release it. That's because offloading your worries onto the page frees up the mental resources that can help you cope with the challenges life presents and fortify your spirit. Isaac Dinenson, the author of Out of Africa, said, "I think all sorrows can be born if you put them into a story or tell a story about them." Human beings have a deep desire to tell their stories, and this urge stays with us right up until the moment of our death. I have a friend who works in palliative care who has heard a number of deathbed confessions. One man admitted to killing someone in a war. Another shared that he'd known his whole life he was gay, but it would have hurt too many people to live the way he always wanted to. And then there was the married woman who told her that she hoped when she got to heaven she'd meet her lover again and not her deceased husband. Telling your story doesn't just help you, it can help others. There's a good chance that someone who hears your story has gone through the exact same struggle as you. They want to know what you learned. One of my motivations for writing my memoir was to share the difficult experience of leaving a fundamentalist church and the resulting decade-long estrangement with my family due to our religious differences. It's been gratifying to hear from a number of readers about how they too endured a similar struggle and found some bit of comfort in reading about my experience. Some people doubt that they have what it takes to tell a story. Flannery O'Connor said, "Anyone who survives a Southern childhood has enough material to last a lifetime." I'd amend that to anyone who survives childhood has enough material to last a lifetime. There is something especially potent in our childhood memories. Our early experiences shape who we become as adults. Graham Greene said, "Childhood is the bank balance of the writer." People worry that they don't have anything interesting to write about, but every life is filled with its own particular drama, tragedy, and comedy. And you are the only one who is equipped to write about these things because you are the authority of your own life. Write for yourself, even if you have no interest in getting published or telling your story out loud. Writing is its own reward. When you tell your story, not everyone's going to like it. Just as in life, not everyone's always going to like you. While I was thankful to receive some positive press for my memoir, I did get a bad review on Amazon from one disgruntled reader, which stung. She said, and I quote, "I do not recommend this book. Sorry I bought it. The writer had a lot of problems, such as coming from a dysfunctional family. I was expecting a more upbeat person, not a person who had so many negatives in her life." Ouch. It doesn't feel good when people don't like us, but all too often we focus on the one dissenting voice, the one person who doesn't smile back at us, the one who keeps their arms crossed in the audience instead of applauding our efforts, the one who isn't inclined to encourage us, the one who writes us a really crappy review on Amazon. Why do we focus on the single negative voice instead of the more positive ones? Perhaps their criticism mirrors our own sometimes harsh self-judgment and insecurity. Which brings me to the next point. You don't have to be a perfect protagonist in your story or in your life. You don't have to pretend that you have everything figured out. In fact, we don't usually care much for people who think they do. It's far better to have flaws, and luckily for most of us, that isn't a problem. People will have a much easier time relating to what you have to say if you can be vulnerable and authentic. I wrote about some of my own challenges in my memoir, the long estrangement with my family, drinking too much wine at times, about the father who deserted our family when I was young, my separation after more than 30 years of marriage, my insecurities as a mother, and the fact that I didn't visit my stepfather on his deathbed. None of this was easy to write about, but it is the tough, true stuff of life. Stories are compelling if you can show your messy, conflicted, and complicated self. It's such a gift for someone to tell you the truth, says Lamont, and it's such a gift for someone to create art with the mess and the chaos and the despair of life, to have turned it into a song, a poem, a novel. It's the hugest gift we have to offer one another. Sometimes in writing, as in life, you have to hit delete. I had a great editor on my book who shaved off 10,000 words of material that was weighing the story down. Sometimes things have to be cut out that aren't working, whether it's excess words or that person who was cruel to you. And sometimes the thing that holds us back in writing, as in life, is worrying too much about what other people think. A lot of storytelling is confessional and reveals hard truths. Sometimes these truths have to do with things other people did to us that were unkind. We worry about making them look bad if we tell the truth. I think the question to ask oneself in this situation is whether you are telling your story out of anger or revenge, or whether you're telling it to try to understand what happened and to create understanding in others. Cheryl Strayed, the author of the best-selling memoir Wild, suggests that we be ruthless with ourselves and gentle with others when we're writing about them. Nobody wants to hear a story that simply blames other people for our misery, she says. It's usually best to err on the side of generosity. On the other hand, if people were cruel to you, it's okay to say so because no one owns your story but you. When I was writing my book, I worried about what my mother would think. I wrote about how close we'd been when I was young and how later when I left the church, our relationship became strained to the point that she told me I was going to hell and my children were headed there too. That was what her church had taught her about people like me who left. There were fights and tears, and it seemed impossible to figure out a way to ever be close again. As I wrote about her and took a deep dive into the past, I tried to understand her early life, how she never finished grade school, but had to go out to work at a young age, how she herself was indoctrinated in the faith, how she got married at age 17 to a man who left her 4 years later with 2 kids and had to go on social assistance for a time. My life was so different than hers because I had opportunities she never had. I tried to be compassionate in the way I wrote about her, while also documenting some of the pain of our relationship. I gave the manuscript to her before it was published, and she said she'd get around to reading it at some point. And then she called me the next morning after having stayed up all night to read it. She's never really said what she thinks about my book, but she did tell me she loved me, and it was the first time I'd heard those words in 20 years. And while I'm not a person who really believes in miracles, that certainly felt like one. Recently, she asked me if I could give her a copy of my book for her to give to a friend, and I took that as a form of endorsement. And eventually she said to me, sometimes people have to agree to disagree. That simple acknowledgement changed everything, and our relationship has been restored. Finally, I want to say that I think stories are the key to an everlasting life, which is helpful for those of us who don't believe in heaven. Your legacy is not in the photo albums you keep stored in the basement. Photos don't tell the whole story, and in fact can be entirely false. We've all smiled in photos when we felt nothing but despair inside. Only stories can get to the truth of our existence. Write them down for your children, for yourself, for your friends, your family, for the world. As Lamont says, you're going to feel like hell if you wake up someday and you never write the stuff that is tugging on the sleeves of your heart. Your stories, memories, visions, and songs. Your truth, your version of things in your own voice. That's really all you have to offer us. And that's also why you were born. You don't have to be a writer or a performer to tell your story. If there's anything I've learned through 8 years of hosting more than 200 storytellers who have shared their true life tales at the 6-Minute Memoir, it's that anyone can do this if they have a good story and they're willing to spend a bit of time crafting it. We're living in a divided time, but stories have the unique ability to bind us together and remind us what we have in common. Loving our neighbor starts with understanding our neighbor, and storytelling allows us to do that. Jeanette Walls, author of the memoir, classic memoir, The Glass Castle, says one of the lessons she learned from writing her memoir is how much we all have in common. So many of us think that certain things only happen to us. I'm constantly urging people, especially older folks, to write about their lives. Memoir is about handing over your life to someone and saying, this is what I went through, this is who I am, and maybe you can learn something from it. Stories tell people who we are and help us remember who we used to be. Your stories are your legacy. They help keep us alive. They keep us alive long after we die. You're never going to kill storytelling, says our own Margaret Atwood. It's built into the human plan.
And thank you so much for that. It really inspires us, older people, as you refer to us, to maybe create some discipline in our COVID lives, to spend some of the time when we are playing solitaire on our phones to instead pick up the pen and try to be truthful to ourselves. At church, we make our offering while listening to music. So please join me in listening to our hymn, Every Time I Feel the Spirit.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Upon the mountain where my Lord stood, out of God's mouth came fire and snow. Look all around me, it looks so fine, till I ask my Lord if all was mine. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Jordan River, reaching and cold, it chills the body, but not the soul. There is but one train upon its track. It runs to heaven and then right back. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
I've been asked by the hardy volunteers at the Eva Rothwell clothing room to tell us, stop already with the donations. The clothing room, which is in operation, was overwhelmed with donations. The racks are full, and currently the need for donations is satisfied. Thank you so much for your generosity. The other thing I would like to draw your attention to was a request from Roy Dahl and his partner. It was in the announcements that are sent out on, I think it's Wednesday, we get the announcements, that they would really appreciate some assistance because of Roy's illness. So I encourage you to check back with those announcements and have a read to see what kinds of assistance they would appreciate and how you can facilitate getting it to them. I'm closing the worship service today with a poem chosen by Anne Bachma. After my reading of The Way It Is by William Safford, we will enjoy our postlude with Jim Barrett is going to share with us his rendition of We Can Work It Out. You will then have a chance to chat with one another if you so choose. Bruce will be putting you into small chat rooms. But I think there's an exit door, so don't worry about being in the room. So the poem, the way it is. There is a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it's hard for people to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You just don't ever let go of the thread. Thank you for attending our worship this morning, and I wish you all to be well, happy, and peaceful. And now to Jim Barrett.
Try to see it my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on? While you see it your way, run the risk of knowing that love may soon be gone. We can work it out. We can work it out. Think of what I was saying. You can get it wrong and still you think that it's alright. Think of what you're saying. We can work it out and get it straight or say goodnight. We can work it out. We can work it out. Life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend. I have always thought that it's a crime. So I will ask you once again. Try to see it my way. Only time will tell if I am right or I am wrong. While you see it your way, there's a chance that we may fall apart before too long. We can work it out. We can work it out. Life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend. I have always thought that it's a crime. So I will ask you once again. Try to see it my way. Only time will tell if I am right or I am wrong. While you see it your way, there's a chance that we may fall apart before